Right, well, I thought I'd do a quick podcast just to try this out, and also because it's something I've been thinking about starting up. What I'm going to talk about is things that recently have been interesting me. So recently that's been Flat Earth, which I've been listening on YouTube, on Jamie Brown, Beyond the Imaginary Curve, Sheeps and Neeps, Pete Shea, amongst others. Obviously that story starts with did it start with 9/11? I can't remember if it was 9/11 that made me question. It's funny how when you listen to a lot of people who have come across to the idea of flat Earth, although I am still I would say I'm undecided, but I don't really know, to be honest. I think the thing is what I've come to learn is it's very difficult to know what is truth and what is not truth, what's false. And that's because I think the problem I'm having is that what I'm learning, a little bit, unfortunately, by them coming across with this information, and also other people like Ollie Demogard and people like that have talked about false flags and conspiracies and 9/11 and etc., is the fact that you can't believe anyone. If you can't believe the state, the government, the media, then they're people, and then you realise you can't believe people. And obviously the people that are telling you about conspiracies, false flag, flat earth, whatever, they're also people. So obviously everyone has their own agenda and everyone has their own beliefs and goals, and so then therefore it's difficult to know who to believe, because the arguments from both sides seem plausible, some more than others. So that gives me a way to lean. And obviously some people will say that obviously you can decide for yourself by objective reasoning or objective investigation of what you yourself can see and understand, which works to a certain degree, but then you're limited by your knowledge or limited by your experience or what you know. Obviously we're everything we know we are taught. So therefore I'm limited by that very fact that my whole way of thinking has been taught to me. So to try and break free of that is impossible, because I've been taught how to think. I can't suddenly decide a new way of thinking as such, because everything that I know is learned. That's how, as children, we operate. We're a clean slate when we're born to a large degree, and then we're taught everything. So anyway, I've wandered off a little bit. But that's the beauty of these podcasts, and hopefully that's the beauty of you who are listening, that they are generally ramblings and they're not coherent theses, whichever it is. So I don't know whether it was 9/11 that woke me up to all of this. I'm not sure it was, but like I was saying at the beginning, it's interesting when you listen to a lot of people who've gone down what they refer to as the rabbit hole. Is it starts with 9/11, and mine to a certain degree does. I mean, it's strange that a lot of the conspiracies like 9/11 and all these other what they call false flags, I didn't believe in them. I believed the official story, for a better word, and the phone just come on. So the only thing I did question, and I knew wasn't true, was the Iraq-Afghanistan war after 9/11. And it's strange that I did believe in the Twin Towers falling down, being hit by planes. But I think a lot of that's to do with that I took what was shown and how it was explained by journalists as being factually true, even though I know that journalists are not often factually true. that maxim of don't let facts get in the way of a good story is very evident. So my first true awakening, I guess, was the Iraq-Afghanistan war, the weapons of mass destruction, when Tony Blair, the British Prime Minister, and to a lesser degree George W. Bush, the United States President of then, talked about weapons of mass destruction, being able to hit us within 45 minutes. I mean, it was ludicrous. When I first heard it, I thought, did they say 45 minutes? I mean, I knew they didn't have any weapons of mass destruction, and I knew that from the very beginning, that this war was an agenda, that they just wanted to have this war, but I didn't connect the fact that 9/11 was the trigger, was the way to get into it. So yeah, I believe that, but I believe that I believe that the World Trade Center event happened, 9/11 happened, but they were using that to be able to invade countries that they wanted to. Their axis of evil, which they came up with. And yeah, I remember telling people, no, that's not true. You're going to find there's no weapons, and they're lying to us. And that was the first time that I realised that. And I thought, how can they ever come back from this? That they lied. The most important person, the Prime Minister, the President, lied to their people just so that they could go into Afghanistan and Iraq. And then obviously I saw the agenda on BBC, on Channel 4, different ones. Channel 4 tended to try and be more truthful. And to a certain degree, certain journalists on the BBC, I can't remember his name now, the one that stood up for an MP, he was trying to enlighten people of the truth. But for the majority, the media was giving the official story, sort of defending this war as if it was factually evident, despite, I mean, it was ludicrous. The 45 minutes was ludicrous. It was like so obvious, and yet they defended it, and that made me see that the media, the journalists, they have an agenda as well, even though they're not meant to, and they were lying, and it frustrated me that the way this was. And I remember the million demonstration, and it made no effect. So people's voice was not heard by government, despite all of being the biggest demonstration there had been. And that made me understand how governments can lie. And there's lots of poems that I wrote. You can see them on YouTube under John Doyle Poems. Lots of Iraq poems and stuff attacking that, and in things like The Dead City, which I was writing around that time, which were not giving a very flattering death to the Prime Minister, because I was horrified by this. But then obviously this is all happening, and then it was only years later, recently, in the last year I think, that I started on YouTube looking at conspiracies. And then I came up with, and I don't know which order it was, to be honest, whether it was 9/11 first. I know that captured my interest, but there were other things, like the 7/7 and the Sandy Hook and different events, because it may have been whatever the most current event that took place was the first one that opened my eyes, but the major one was obviously 9/11. But yeah, it was interesting to know, and this is maybe where we all fall down, is that I believed 9/11 to be true. But then when on YouTube I was presented with an alternative view, I suppose is the word I should use, it made me realise how much was taken for granted, and how easily it is to persuade people to believe in whatever is put in front of them, because we're bred to trust government, to trust media. We grow up watching the BBC or whatever network, and we trust them. We don't even question that. Why would they lie if someone says that to you? And even when I say things like that to people, they can't fathom the idea that they could possibly lie. They would defend it without even knowing these people, without even a question of doubt, which is weird, really, because you don't know these people, and everyone knows that human beings lie. You know that they are capable of doing it, so why would you believe that just because they're an organisation that's lasted a long time, that they wouldn't lie, or that people wouldn't, but they would defend them as if they're their own blood. And I, to a certain degree, did that as well in different matters. So yeah, it was interesting, when they talked to... I mean, obviously I always was a bit, not concerned, but I always thought it was a bit dubious, the planes going through the building. It didn't quite make sense, but I thought, well, I've never seen anything like this before, and obviously whatever arguments they gave, I believed. But then when you hear, the idea of the pancake theory, and where was the resistance in the buildings, all three of them falling down. I think I did hear about building 7, but I don't think it was very widely talked about, but I do vaguely remember it. And then 6 as well, which didn't fall down. I think that was just got damaged, didn't it? But the way that they all fell down in exactly the same way, despite having different circumstances, I mean, it's very suspicious. And the way they fell down, even when you come up with their idea of the jet fuel that they claim bent the structure or inside or whatever. I know this makes me sound like I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm just, what I mean. And that caused the building to fall down. But why did it pancake? Why was there no resistance at all? I understand that, if those beams where the plane were melted and that caused it to bend and buckle, and then the weight of the above made it come down, I understand that, but you would expect some resistance as it fell down bit by bit by bit, and maybe not to just disintegrate into nothing, like the big chunks, but it was like dust. And like, even if or building 7 was just fires, I mean, there's been no buildings that have ever come down like that before or since. I think there was one, but that I remember seeing recently that it did come down a bit similar, but not quite. But 3 buildings to do exactly the same thing in the shortest amount of time. Anyway, so then I started looking at other things, the idea of false flags, crisis actors. I mean, all and like with flat Earth, and obviously with that, at first because I went through 9/11 and false flags, and starting to think that a lot of these things seem very similar, and Ollie Damigard giving a lot of clues to explaining them all. Maybe very dubious. And then flat Earth, I thought, no, I can't. And a lot of people say the same thing. And then when I actually started to watch, I think it was Jamie Brown, or it might be OBD, is it? And also Eric Dubai. Their arguments. And then it was like 9/11 again. Thinking about things that I'd taken for granted, that I'd been taught at school, or just didn't ever think about. I never knew that NASA because when they show you a picture, I mean, I always realised that, and I hated this, that whenever they showed things on BBC News, BBC Sky at night or whatever, you could tell they weren't real pictures, they were CGI, but they would never write, or sometimes they were, but they wouldn't often write whether, am I looking at the real picture, or is that a representation of it? Because obviously they're trying to show you something, but they don't disclose that they're not which it is, which I always thought was wrong. And also, like with nature programs, when they dub sound effects on for the animals, that's not the sound they're making. And I don't understand how factual programs can get away with adding fiction. To me, it seems so wrong. I mean, I want to hear the real animal, and they will say no, because we can't get a microphone up to a worm or something, so we can't hear how it sounds, so we'll just add a sound that we think. I mean, that's ludicrous. There's no defense in that. But you see that the BBC and documentary programs, National Geographic or whatever, already do these types of things, so it's not like it's impossible. So that made me confused when I realized that they were saying that NASA, that they're composites, they're not actual photographs. And that's very worrying when you think about that. Why, and Why are they not just a normal picture? Why is there so few pictures? Why is there so many CGI stuff? Why can't you see satellites? I mean, I don't understand that. When this recent Elon Musk car went into space, it didn't crash into one satellite. There's thousands of them out there, but they managed to plot a journey into space passing them without ever hitting any of these very small objects that are flying around. I don't understand how that would be possible. And all these things, when they launch to ISS, how do they plot the path of all these satellites? Or do they know exactly the trajectory and where the path of all these different countries' satellites are going to be? Why do we never see? And then they always come up with some excuse. But the problem is, that's what I'm saying. My common sense says I should be able to see them, but then they come up with an excuse. So I don't know which to believe anymore. But obviously most people say you believe your common sense. But then, of course, I'm limited by things like knowledge, by lots of different things. So that's where I'm stuck with, I don't know to believe anyone. And that's a problem, really. And then obviously I've never seen curvature of the earth. I've never even thought about that. I didn't even, I like when they talk about the idea of the boat going over the curve, and that was one of the main reasons why they thought about the curve. I don't even remember being taught about that. But the fact that they stick on to that argument that, that now obviously with telescopes and cameras you can zoom in and the boat comes back on the surface of the water and it hasn't gone around a curve, but they still stick with that argument despite the argument they came up with eyesight. So that argument was redundant. It was never true. It was just because of their eyesight that they couldn't see it. So that means they were wrong, and they won't admit that that was wrong. And that's something you can prove today with a camera. But that was where and then the other things to do with sticks. And I've always been dubious about how do they know how big things are, because they can't measure things. There's a lot of guesswork that goes in, but they never say that. And the fact that, that theories are considered fact. I never knew gravity was a theory and not an actual fact. All these things that they don't disclose for you, this is a theory, And that's another problem. This is like the BBC using sound effects. And I think that's where all these things are wrong, that when you talk at school, they don't say, well, we're going to talk about, gravity. It's never been proven, so it may be wrong. It's a theory, but this is what we're going with. They will just talk about gravity. They may use the word theory, but no one will disclose that means it could be possibly wrong. It's just a guess. It can't be proven. I mean, why are we teaching things that can't be proven? That seems very, And obviously with the curvature as it's a ball, it should go both ways, isn't it? They often always talk about the horizon and, it should be there, but it also should be the other way as well. And often you see pictures and then you think, oh yeah, I can see the curve, and then you realise it's a GoPro camera or it's a fisheye lens, and they never use a normal lens, and I don't understand why. That's very, very suspicious. Why would you not use a normal lens? And obviously their argument will, because they want a panoramic view, they want to show as much as possible, but I can't believe never can you see a normal camera. And even the moon, with the pictures from the moon, I think there's only, I don't know how many different pictures there are, but I can only think of that one where it's half of it. I mean, there just seems to be, the moon was one thing I was always very suspicious of, because the photos didn't quite make sense, the crosshairs and all that kind of stuff. But then the problem is people come up with evidence, whether it's the media, whether it's the government, whether it's individuals, and obviously each one of them could tamper with it, each one can make up something, and then you're left with not really knowing what is fact, what is fiction, what is the truth, what is falsehood. And that's, maybe we never will, maybe that's the problem, and maybe that's because we just can't trust each other, but that's where I am at the moment. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. I think that's enough to go on with. Maybe I'll continue with another one, rambling on different subjects. I hope I haven't, well, I've given you a basic introduction into my thoughts and where they are at the moment. Right. If you want to check out or comment to me, you can do it through here, or my YouTube, which is youtube.com// or /, whichever one it is, John Doyle Poems. Take care, take it easy, God bless, and peace.